and 5 of my friends and colleagues are working on our final Capstone project as part of the Sheridan game design program. Development of this project will take place over 8 months and is split into 5 phases. We're knee-deep in the production phase as we work to complete our alpha build. That means locking in all of our gameplay features, like character controls, level design, gameplay mechanics, everything. Let's get started. You might have noticed our game looks a bit different now. That's because we decided to transition away from the name and theme that was previously Eye of the Storm, and switch to a new style that's brighter and without any of our previous stormy features. But why did we do this? First, it's important to explain why we chose the storm theme in the first place. We thought that setting would mix really well with our lasso and tether mechanics, because it would allow for all kinds of physics objects to be flying around the environment for you to mess with. We made an orbit that can spin objects around you, and wind gusts that can blow around blocks and even the player. We experimented with a bunch of other things too. After completing our MVG build in December, we realized none of our storm-related mechanics were really doing much to sell the idea of being inside a storm. Our orbit system didn't really work on larger-sized islands, and the wind proved itself to be more frustrating than fun. There wasn't a single mechanic strong enough to justify the storm as a central setting, but adding more would tremendously inflate our game's scope. The second issue was that we were losing focus on the core interactions of our main lasso and tether mechanics. Big Mama is a good example of this. She had lots of cool interactions with the storm's wind mechanic, but she also required advanced knowledge of the rod, tether, and overall physics system. We were creating evolutions and twists on our mechanics before players even knew the basics. Either we doubled down with the storm setting or just cut it. During a team meeting, we thought back to our playtests and remembered how players were having a great time just learning the basics of our mechanics. Discovering the potential of these tools through simple interactions, like moving a block from one point to another, or just tethering random stuff in the environment, was universally enjoyable, and it helped us realize there was an incredible amount of depth to be explored through simple interactions before needing to introduce new mechanical twists. To reflect this change in direction, we created a new level with less features and a larger focus on teaching the basics of our mechanics. And we updated the look of our game to be much more bright and colorful, and increase the contrast of our player against the environment. By reevaluating the core appeal of our game and deciding to cut back and focus on the fundamentals, we officially decided to leave Eye of the Storm behind and embrace the new theming of Cosmic Ranger V.
How do you go from a barrel to an alien fish girl? Most of what 3D work I'd done in the past were objects like barrels or radios, and none of them were as complex as a rigged, animated, game-ready character. Despite this, I was suddenly in charge of making the model for Vivian, the main character for Cosmic Ranger V. I was able to find a bunch of videos telling me how to get started, and how to set up my ref sheet and ways to block things out. Most of what I found was for Blender though, and I'd only been taught and practiced with Maya in school. I kept having specific problems and questions about modeling in Maya that I could only figure out by asking a professor, friend, or sometimes just messing around myself. I decided to just try anyway. I started blocking things out of simple shapes, and basically just tried to focus on making Vivian match the turnaround I made for her. Even what I learned from way back while making a barrel was useful. How to extrude, how to bevel, what different terms mean, and how to go between soft and hard surface modeling, so on and so forth. Once I was done, I was left with the first pass of Vivian the Cosmic Ranger, but she still couldn't move, and we were out of time for me to try and learn how to rig in the same way as I tried to learn modeling. So, what did we do? Well, we looked at free resources online, and decided to use Mixamo. My teammate John and I used Mixamo to give Vivian a temporary rig and animations, and then set them up in Unity to make her switch between them properly during gameplay. After that, I separated the tail mesh for Viv and, with the help of a friend and some tutorials, I rigged, weight painted, and made a simple looping tail wag animation for her. I then put it onto Vivian in Unity and set it up so that it would follow the rest of the body properly. What we ended up with is a character that can run, jump, flip, wag her tail, and zoom down zip lines as we wanted. Even if there are a few things to fix in the future, we've got a first version done, and I learned a lot from the process.
For Alpha, I focused on helping level design and started working on the environment art. I mainly worked on the earlier sections. The main objective here is to teach the controls and interactions of the fishing rod and tether. We removed almost all free moving blocks that players could build in the beginning, replacing them with on-rail platforms. This gives us more control on the level navigation, remove hoarding issues that we found while playtesting, and clearly tell the players where platforms can go. This is especially useful in our new tether tutorials. We can teach players the different interactions of the tether, such as moving themselves up and holding a platform or object in a certain place. The next part I looked into was the environment art. We decided to leave the underwater theme and climb to the mountaintops above the clouds. I didn't have much time left, so I created a concept of how the level will look like in this new area. Using Houdini, I was able to create some rock pillars and trees. I quickly made some textures and materials and applied them to the meshes. Overall, it fits the game quite well. This looks less muddy than our previous version and the color contrasts with the player character. However, I think there's a bit too much detail with the textures and I will update them later.
Cameras. Such a key yet underappreciated part of what makes games feel good. When we decided to swap to third person way back when, our prototype was made with Cinemachine, which is a great tool. However, there were clipping issues that were causing the camera to go haywire in tight spaces due to collision. We were also in the process of reworking how the lasso hold worked so that it would move up and down rather than simply follow your cursor, and that required camera changes as well. I thought it'd be a good idea to just bite the bullet and script it myself, rather than try and fiddle with settings aimlessly. I ended up creating a custom camera system with a base controller and a modifier interface, so now the camera has variable zoom, in and out speeds with no collision issues, as well as positional settings for designers to play with. Sadly, this also meant that we couldn't use Cinemachine's convenient track and dolly system for cutscenes, and so to replace it, I made something that works sort of like a media playback system, where triggers can be attached to anything, and contains fully scripted player-based or camera-only cutscenes for the cutscene handler to play, as showcased by these beautiful rope rides and these scenic shots of the starting area. Additional things I worked on for this milestone included a nifty piston interactable that is activated by the tether and lasso, a nice transparency dither shader, an infinite object spawn pile, and our new ledge climb mechanics.
Fmod is an amazing tool for game developers. However, it can be pretty daunting if you've never used it before. What Fmod does is it offers an alternative to the Unity sound system and allows both developers and sound designers to have an easy and more flexible time implementing audio into their game. However, the cost of this is having to learn the Fmod system, learn how to use Fmod Studio, and learn how to implement it into code, given how it's pretty different from what Unity already has. Having to learn how to Fmod under a deadline can be terrifying. That's the exact situation our team found ourselves in. To pull this off, we came up with a brilliant tool for reducing scope. It's called the good enough mindset. For example, some audio may sound better if it was implemented into the game's world space, like a 3D sound, but as long as it played properly, the rest could be added in later. Another area we did this was with the volume of the sounds. Yes, we could have spent a bunch of time adjusting each and every sound effect to be perfect, or we could just make a settings menu where you could turn down the volume of the sounds altogether, which was something we had to do anyways. By focusing on the bare minimum, we gave ourselves room that we needed to learn the ins and outs of Fmod and let us focus on making sure that we did these small things correctly rather than doing a bunch of things incorrectly. Now with a strong foundation of Fmod in our alpha, we'll have an even easier time in our beta, trying out all the advanced features and improving our sounds.